to care, and it's an amazing testament to how much people want to stop this. So Bill 1118 has died. We're watching where other ethanol language might pop up. We figure it's going to pop up somewhere. We don't think that's died. But one of the things that you probably all know is that Ryan is suing the city. There's 2 lawsuits. One is in district court, and about 2 weeks ago they filed in federal, Tallahassee federal court. They're asking for a jury trial, and they're asking for a lot of money. And they're saying that their 14th Amendment civil rights were violated. So I'm going to turn this over to Tom Budd, and he's going to give us all an update. But one of the things I wanted to say is completely off topic, but next week is Earth Day on the 22nd. I don't know, it's like the 52nd year maybe. Anyway, Sierra Club is having a Earth Day event at the Green Turtle from, I think it's 6 to 9. We're going to have music, we're going to have fun. We hope you guys come.
Good afternoon, folks. Glad you can make it. I'm not going to take too much time because we want to get to our presentation. But I'd like to catch you up on some of the things that NAF, No Ethanol Fernandina, has done. Most of you that have been with us, and I recognize a lot of faces, so you've been in this fight as long as we have. We have a nonprofit called Fernandina Wins Inc. We realized that in order to win this fight, we had to be active in Tallahassee. That's where the action is right now, and if they were to get this bill through, we take a conduit this wide to beat this. Because if we change the definition of chemical manufacturing to mean that Ryan's proposal is not prohibited by the comp plan and the LDC. So it's like we would be able to win, but we couldn't because they changed the rules. So we're in Tallahassee. We realized we had to win that fight. We have just today activated a new nonprofit corporation called Fernandina Wins Advocacy, which allows us to lobby in Tallahassee, and we've engaged a lobbying firm to help us do that. Because you can't do it through the same entity. 501c3 is restricted in some of its activities because of its tax exemption status. Now, 501c4 is also tax exempt, but it's not tax deductible donations. There's a difference there. And then they let the IRS let you do more things in that second entity. So the point is, we're in this fight. We're organized now in a way that we can get in that fight with teeth, and we expect to win it. We mentioned Bill 1118, the Senate bill. That it's still active, but everybody says it's dead. It's not going to move. That's the one that has the ethanol language in it that is so offensive to us here in Fernandina Beach. But it's like whack-a-mole. It's going to pop up in another bill. So we're watching 1080, which passed the Rules Committee today. So I don't know if that can still be amended. I guess anything can be amended until it gets. But we have a board member in the back, maybe in that afterwards. If you have questions, he can help you with it. But he's a retired lobbyist, so he gets this stuff. He's done it in Tallahassee. He knows the players. And then 579 is the House bill that's the companion to 1080. So we're watching both of those because it's very likely that something's going to get attached to one of them that we're going to have to deal with. We're going to need to raise money. We'll do that. We'll communicate through our emails. That's not what we're here for tonight. But we're going to need to fund this effort. The community's been good in supporting this till now, and we're going to have to keep doing that if we want to win. Thanks for coming. And there's one other person that I want to acknowledge. She's really just joined us, but she's done an awful lot in just a month or so, and that's Annie, who's in the back here. She's recording this section for us.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, people. Well, didn't do much. Didn't keep it organized.
She's really helped us. So, thanks, Annie.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you to sign this. I know we have you in there. If you know you get our emails from No Ethanol Fernandina, I mean, that's what we need to know, that you're in our database so we communicate with you. Who's up?
Emily.
Larry, you want to do a little introduction?
Yes. This is Emily.
Larry. That's your introduction ever.
Thank you for coming down, and I know you have some latest and greatest information. And there's a lot of articles in the news lately about water quality in rivers. I saw one last night on TV. I asked you a question about it.
Okay.
There's a lot going on. All yours.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for inviting St. Mary's Riverkeeper down to present on the recent biennial assessment that was released by the state of Florida. I do want to introduce you also to two people in the audience that are with us today. One is my photographer, Allison. she's newest recruit for our team. She was hired about a month and a half ago as our water quality coordinator. So she is the convener of our volunteers. So she's here to learn and get her feet wet and understand what all of the work that the volunteers are doing for St. Mary's Riverkeeper and how that impacts the state water quality reporting. We also have our water quality committee chair, board trustee, Rick Brenner is in the back. So he is here also. He's also got our ArcGIS expertise, so a lot of the maps that you'll see here today is what he developed by contacting the County Department of Health. And then today he also contacted DEP so we can overlay some of the impairment modeling with a lot of the septic tank permits that you'll see in some of these maps. Okay? So just an introduction, so St. Mary's Riverkeeper, we are a 501c3 organization, nonprofit. We are different from the St. Johns River Water Management District. We are also different from the St. Johns Riverkeeper. We have jurisdiction over the Amelia River, which is a major tributary to the St. Mary's River. So if you have some concerns about water quality or any kind of permitting issue, you would call us. If you called St. Johns Riverkeeper, they would send you to us. But this is our jurisdiction. This is the realm that we work within, and I'll show you all of our jurisdiction in a little bit. This beautiful image was taken last Friday. We did a paddle trip out of Traders Hill boat ramp. So that's a beautiful aerial shot. And then we floated on down to Scott's Landing over in Hilliard. So it's a nice 3-hour paddle, and it was a beautiful day like today where there was no clouds in the sky. And then I did point it out to somebody earlier. If you see in the very tippy top, there's looks like there's a mountain. Can y'all see that? That's the landfill in Charlton County. That is the mountain in Charlton County. That is the landfill. Just so you know. So our new mission is to protect the St. Mary's River now, and for our future we'll talk about our strategic planning process that we went through last year, but that is our newest mission. Every 3 to 5 years you got to get a new mission to align with your current programs and your efforts forwards, and since COVID we know things change very drastically and can happen quickly, so our old one did not quite fit where we were going as an organization, and so now we have this nice, easy one to remember that fits on one line. Great. So, thank you, Allison. So this is also our vision. So for the next 10 years, a lot of our focus is on ecological integrity, shared stewardship, and enduring appreciation. Also focusing on things like future generations, so our resilience work that I'll talk on very briefly tonight. Which is going to be happening for the next 2.5 years for us through our federal grant. We are a border river, so we do work in Florida, and we both also work in Georgia, which is a blessing and a curse, right? So y'all are working with the Florida legislative session. I get to do 2. Okay, and last year they were at the same time, so that was exciting. It was not. So really fostering sustainable economic development. We know development's coming, y'all are feeling it, especially here on the island. So really understanding that when there's a development that comes that we want, right? So we are really wanting that sustainable economic development, that recreation, the tourism, heads and beds, they come in, they spend their money, and then they leave, right? Whereas in other parts of our watershed, they have extractive development, right? So it's very impactful on the waterway, very impactful on the land, negatively. So we don't want to encourage that, but also know that, especially in the western side of the watershed, they're very rural, they're very poor, and if any industry comes in and waves their shiny checks, you know, what's gonna happen? So providing that alternative development opportunity where we can still encourage the local community to be successful without the extractive process. We are, as a border river, we do participate in both Waterkeepers Florida and Georgia Water Coalition, and all Waterkeepers are under the umbrella of Waterkeeper Alliance, which is an international organization. It's like Sierra Club, right? You have your chapters. So Waterkeeper Alliance is international. You can be a bay keeper, coast keeper, water keeper, river keeper, lake keeper if you want. There are 15 water keepers in the state of Florida, and there are 9 in the state of Georgia. Swanee and the St. Mary's make up for both of those because we do work in both states. So from Okie to Ocean, I'm going to take full credit for coming up with that. So this is our jurisdiction, is in that light blue color. So it is a very small watershed in relation to things like the St. Johns River, which is 310 miles. The St. Mary's is 130 miles from Okie to Ocean as the water flows. If you were to fly from our headwaters in the Okefenokee Swamp to the Atlantic Ocean here, it would only be 7 miles, or 70 miles. So it's called a crooked river, not to be confused with Crooked River in Georgia. But it's because it's got this square root value sign. So if you're an engineer, or you remember back in the high school math, and you had to do all of that by hand, the square root value sign of the river is, you know, it has that little curve right there. This is what we call the U-bend of the river. So I'm going to show you a little of how dynamic and different the river looks from the beginning all the way out here to the end. So the first one is as the river exits out of that southeastern corner of the swamp. So 20% of the swamp flows to the St. Mary's River. The rest of it flows to the Swanee out to the Gulf. So the Okefenokee is the headwaters of 2 beautiful waterways, and it connects the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, to the Atlantic Ocean. So we have that connectivity by waterways. So that's what it looks like right as it exits out. It's called the North Prong of the St. Mary's. And then it flows south along the western edge of Trail Ridge. Who has heard of Trail Ridge before? Okay. So Trail Ridge, think about thousands of years ago when waters were much higher, it deposited a whole bunch of sand. Trail Ridge is a natural formation that flows that runs about 100 miles from the middle of Georgia down to start Florida, and it's an ancient barrier island. So it's when the waters were much higher, that was the barrier island like Cumberland is today, like Jekyll is today. That's an ancient barrier island. 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, the waters receded, left that ridge system. The water in the swamp couldn't get to the ocean directly, so 80% it's tilted southwest a little bit. So most of it flowed out to the Gulf of Mexico, and then that 20% flowed south to form the St. Mary's. And then as it bends, I'm going to touch it one more time. As it bends around, go ahead, Allison. Thank you. So as it bends around, it's cutting through the only gap in Trail Ridge. And so that's why you see these beautiful white sandy beaches. This is the same sand y'all see on your beaches out here. So this is the ancient beach, sugar sand. People on the west side of the watershed don't come over here because why would they need to? It's right there in their backyards. And it's beautiful, it's breathtaking. You get the amber color from the tannic water, blue skies, white clouds, the green trees, absolutely amazing. So it cuts through that only gap in Trail Ridge, and then it starts turning north. And the reason why it runs north for so long is is because there's another ridge system that flows here that y'all may know about. It's the Penn Holloway Terrace. So there is a trail or a ridge system on the eastern side as well. So the river is running between Trail Ridge and the Penn Holloway Terrace. Okay? And then it goes all the way up into the Hilliard-Folkestone area, and then it starts at the shoulder of Nassau County, and then it bends to the right to head all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. And this is about where you stop seeing these sandbars, because now you're getting away from that ancient barrier island. There's no more sand there. Now you're getting more into the swamps. Keep going east. This is the view from White Oak Plantation's Pavilion. If you're going to be participating in our cleanup this weekend, anybody coming? Yeah, you too. It's like you're told to come. Sorry, my board member. So we have our annual cleanup. We do it around Earth Day. 400 volunteers clean up over 6 tons of trash throughout the watershed. And we have our luncheon at White Oak afterwards. So it's one of the ways that White Oak Conservation donates to our own organization. And so that's the marshes off of it. And then as you keep going, that is a picture of Beach Creek from Cumberland Island. So the St. Mary's River is bookended by 2 national treasures, one soon to be world treasure, the Okefenokee Swamp, and then Cumberland Island National Seashore, and also right here at Fort Clinch State Park. Okay? So that's our jurisdiction. So we go east to west, and then from north, we go from Crooked River in Georgia all the way to the Nassau River in the south. Okay? So why we're here? Florida's 303D list. Some exciting stuff, right? So these are the dark colors of impaired waterways. The darker the color, the more it has impaired on it. So just to give you an idea of all of Nassau County, so you can see in Boulogne and Hilliard, down in Callahan, over here near Bryceville, and then of course over into the Amelia Island area, Yulee space. And so what we're going to focus in on is our Amelia Island area. Okay, let's go ahead and click it one more time. Okay, so this is from the biennial assessment. I looked it up today just to make sure I had all the correct information. So the WIBID is what they're called, the Watershed Basin ID. So every watershed, every small watershed has what's called a WIBID number. And so these are the WIBID numbers. So Amelia River, 2124A, then there's Egan's Creek, and then there's Escambia Slough, also known as Alligator Creek. And this is what they're impaired for. So nutrients, chlorophyll A, it's algae. It's algae growing. It's from photosynthesis. Okay. Nutrients, total phosphorus. We know phosphorus from our fertilizers, and then dissolved oxygen, which is of course what aquatic species need in order to be able to breathe. So this is what, and then bacteria is enterococci. So most of us know bacteria contamination to be E. coli. It's usually what pulls the lettuce off the shelves. It's actually in your guts. All warm-blooded mammals have E. coli in their guts. It's when it's ingested that it is dangerous. And so enterococci, E. coli dies in high saline waters, so high salt waters, but enterococci can thrive in it. So that's why it's not saying E. coli, it's enterococci, but the source is still the same. Warm-blooded mammals. Next one. Next one. These are the little clicks. So where does 303D come from? It comes from the Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act is the basis for all water keepers. It's the reason water keepers were able to form in the 1970s, because it gave community advocacy an opportunity to fight big industry. It gave the people the voice to challenge big industry. And so, but the problem is one single person maybe can't afford to sue somebody. But as a group, you can, right? So you can join a waterkeeper program to protect your waterways, and then we, with the support of our members, are able to go and protect your waterways for you as a community leader, representing you. So the section of the Clean Water Act is the section 303D, and this requires that waters that do not meet applicable water quality standards by the state has to be submitted to EPA every 2 years. So that's why it's called a biennial assessment. Georgia, because I have to do this twice, is a triennial assessment. So they do theirs every 3 years. So, but that is why it's called a biennial assessment and why it's called a 303D list. And it has to do with impaired waters. The water quality data that the state samples for is stored and accessible on what's called the wind or storage system. So you can go, good luck, because everything on the state page is so easy to handle and maneuver and so user friendly. But you can see it, and you can find out what the water quality data is, and it's through their WIN program. The data collected from the state, from their water testing program, and from local groups like St. Mary's Riverkeeper helps DEP better assess the quality of waters in our area because we know our waters best. We know what the contamination could possibly be. We probably know where all the septic tanks are. We know all of this because we live here, we work here, we represent here. So having that information helps us to develop these water quality criteria. It allows us to have impaired waters rules. It provides an opportunity to develop a total max daily loads, I call them TMDLs, and then you can create and implement a basin management action plan, which is called a BMAP. And I'll explain all of those in a little bit. But that's how our water quality data can be used to assist DEP in a lot of these water assessments around our area. So a TMDL is a goal, and a BMAP is a plan, and that equals a pollution diet. Someone explained that to me, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, right? So we have our diet goal, we have a plan to get there, and that's our diet, right? So that's our pollution diet. So we're going to go through this process using Escambius flu as an example, because this has recently been happening, and Riverkeeper has been a part of this process, and it also gives y'all a local perspective of how one of your waterways has been impacted and how it's being restored. Okay? So, everybody know where Escambius flu is? Okay, do you know where West Rock is off of 8th Street? Okay, so you're heading towards 8th Street, where all the trucks are going, right? Right into that entrance. Escambia Street is the dirt road just before their entrance. Because it goes, you're gonna have to correct me, Beach, what's the sign? Okay, Dade, and then Escambia, and then it's West Rock. So that creek, thank you, and it flows out under the port, where the boat stopped. So step one is to determine if your waterway is impaired. Okay, so you gotta do some water sampling. So I've been in a job, I got hired in 2022, and I immediately recognized that Escambia had some issues because I was looking at the water quality data. And so the graph you see is the sampling data we've been taking, and I just did it from 2023 because we do it every month, so otherwise you wouldn't be able to see the graph. Okay, sorry, I'm blocking, you can't see the graph, can you? So this is just from 2023 and 2024. Anything above 410 is alarming, okay? EPA says E. coli contamination or bacteria fecal coliform contamination, anything above 410, colony forming units per 100 milliliters, I'll explain it in a second. Like, don't even look at the water. You'll get sick. Look at the 7,300, okay? Most of these spikes we see during the summertime because bacteria rapidly replicates in warmer temperature, warmer waters. So we've been sampling this for about 7 years. We've been in an organization for about 8. And there is a tidal influence. When the tide comes in and you sample at an incoming high tide, the water, the bacteria results are low because it's all getting diluted, okay? When it's outgoing, you're gonna get high levels because it's capturing all the data, all the E. coli coming from downstream, or from upstream to downstream. So we always can sample on an outgoing tide, otherwise we're just diluting it with the water that's coming in from the ocean, okay? So we put out a notice, there's already a sign on the street, and yet people are still fishing there. But we put out a notice, we presented to the city commission, we presented all this data, and we told people not to do it. We put it in the press, we did a media release about it. So just to give you an idea, so the plates, the little pink circles you see up there, those are the agar plates that we grow the bacteria on. And all the little blue dots are E. coli colonies. So it's gross, like you don't want to touch that, yes.
Where do you put those notifications? Are they on the beaches or anything?
That is not for us, that's for the state. We send this to the state, we send it to the newspapers, and we present it to the city commission.
Do they ever publish them or put them out?
The one that we sent to the media did. This one was in 2022, was the one we did this one.
That was the last one?
That's the last one we have done, yes. Because nothing, Lori, if you would like to provide some insights?
I was just wondering where your last collection was September 24th, 2024.
Yep.
Where's the last 6 months?
So we have had some transition of volunteers. And so you have to be trained in order to sample. And so Faith Ross, you all love, right? So she has left us, unfortunately, right? And so we have now put somebody in her spot. But it takes some time to train, get them up to speed, get them supplied, all that kind of stuff. But during the winter months, we're not as concerned because it's really like we needed to get somebody in by now because we needed to capture, especially the summer. We want to do it every month, but if we're going to miss a couple of months, I'm not losing sleep over missing it during the winter time.
Thank you.
Yes.
When do you present to the new commission?
We have not yet. I know 3, I actually know all 5 of them, but we have not been able to do this just yet. We usually do it during the summertime, like leading into the summer months to say, hey, we've had this chronic issue. And I'm going to keep moving because Escambia Slough has an excellent story. So, but for other issues, yes, we would go and say these are our chronic cases and for waterway contamination.
So the street is closed.
So that's what I'm getting to.
Is that the reason?
That's why, yes.
Okay.
So I'm getting there. Yes, yes. Ah!
I just wanted to mention that's 1 milliliter.
Oh yeah, so that's just 1 milliliter of water.
Yeah, 1 milliliter.
So when we do our sampling, you pipe cut out 1 milliliter of water out of your baggie that you collected, and you put it on 1 mil on each of those pink circles, and you let it grow for 24 hours, and then you count your colonies. And so then you have to do a math problem, and you have to multiply it by 100 because it's 100 milliliters. So it's how many colony-forming units of blue circles per 100 milliliters of water. So that's yuck, right? You don't want to touch it, you don't want to fish in it.
Those numbers on the graph?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so those are the numbers in the graph.
Is there a reason those were taken right after holidays like that? May 15th is during the Swift Festival, that's right after.
No, they just do it the same day every month.
Oh,
It's the same
Oh, okay.
day, May 4th, May 5th. So everyone has the first Wednesday of the month on their calendar.
okay, that's right near where the clinic's at, is that where?
Yeah, so if you go down Escambia Street, well, you can't go down there anymore. But if you went down Escambia Street, there was a culvert right there. All right, we're gonna keep, yes,
Do you want to say what TNC is?
yes.
Is this limited, like do you test for metals?
We
and
do not.
others? Okay.
No.
So it's very limited, just specific?
I'm getting there, yep, I'm getting there. Let me get there. Y'all are stealing my thunder. You're so great. Step 2 is list the waterway as impaired. So now, you want it to be, if it's bad, you want to list it as impaired. I've never been so excited to have a waterway that's listed as impaired. And the reason is because it opens up funding opportunities to fix the problem. Okay? You can't get anything fixed unless it's listed as impaired. Now there's a double-edged sword to that, which I'll get to. So list 2 is to get the waterway as impaired. So in 2022, we reported Escambia Slough to DEP saying, y'all need to come down here with your fancy-dancy equipment and come do your fancy-dancy testing. And they did, and that's them up there doing their testing. They had their fancy meters, and they did eDNA testing to find out where the contamination was coming from, if it was human or avian. And so in 2022, they came down, which aligns with the fact that Escambia Slough is listed as impaired on the 2022-2024 biennial assessment. It's because of Riverkeeper and our volunteers waving the red flag saying, pay attention to us, we have an issue. So now it's listed as impaired for enterococci. You can see Egan's Creek is on there for enterococci, Amelia River for nutrients, we talked about that earlier. All this information is online. But I wanted to show you, and it's a high priority for a TMDL development. So we'll talk about that one next. So we've identified it as a problem. Now it's listed as impaired, and now you get to assign a TMDL. Remember, a TMDL is like a goal, like your diet goal, right? You want to get there. You want to get back into the state standards of good water quality, okay? So great, but a TMDL is only assigned to a waterway that's listed as impaired. Yay, we can get it cleaned up. Click the button. No timeline to get this done. So there, I talked to the Matanzas Riverkeeper the other day. There's a waterway that's been impaired for 20 years. No TMDL has been assigned to it. Okay, no goal to get it back into it. So there is no required timeline in order to get it, to put a TMDL, a goal on that waterway for it to get back into compliance with the state water quality requirements. Okay, next slide.
So Egan's Creek is also listed as high.
Yes.
Yeah, so why are they not having that? Or are they considered?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like Eagle Square and
Because I'm just going with Escambia Slough, but remember we had those three in Amelia Island and it showed all what they were impaired for. So I'm just focusing on Escambia because it takes you through the whole process. So now we have a TMDS.
Did they find out from the 22 year that they were testing what caused it?
So they did some eADNA testing and they found it to be mostly avian. Right? Y'all have been down there, you've seen the rookery or the roostery, I think it's called. Right? Not as much anymore after they brought those cement bags in, but they found it to be mostly avian. That doesn't mean you should still fish there. It's still contaminated with bad bacteria. You don't want to eat the fish from it. But they did find it was mostly avian. So yeah, we don't know the source until you do some source tracking or EGNA work. So now we have a TMDL for a waterway. Now you can create a BMAP, right? The plan, your diet plan. How are you going to get it into state standards? Once you get to the BMAP, now it's enforceable, right? But you got to get there. You got to get the TMDL on the waterway. So now it's enforceable. So this is a picture of Escambia Street. It's gone. And that's because of the water quality issues of the creek. That's because of the 7 years of water testing our volunteers have done. All the red flags we've been raising every time we brought the state in to do some water testing. So once you get a BMAP, you have two options. Either the state comes in and tells you to fix it and tells you how to fix it, or the local municipality takes it upon themselves to fix themselves. So the city of Fernandina, because I'm pretty sure they're tired of hearing from me, decided to remove the street. They daylighted the street. They daylighted the creek. They allowed the creek because what was happening was the box culvert was too small, right? So now there's a whole lot of water coming in and it can't get out. And so the E. coli settles into the soil. And so that's causing chronic water quality issues. So you could either increase the culvert size, more water's coming in from the ocean, so increase the culvert size if it's a usable waterway, so let the water come in and out faster, or just remove the street. And they decided, because they had the Escambia Street residents in favor of it, the St. Johns River Water Management District gave them a permit for it, the city was happy to do it, it only cost them a couple of $1,000s to do, and that's the street that's now been removed. So that is the locally led restoration activity, and that's what the state is trying to push for, because we know our waterways best. We know what streets aren't as usable, which ones need a bigger box culvert, what needs to happen in order to make that waterway meet water quality standards. Now the issue we are finding, shockingly enough, is that once you remove a street, everyone's like, great, nature will take care of it. There's a lot of erosion issues right now. Because there's a whole bunch of other things that are going on, right? We put a road over our waterway, it had to adapt. We had to adapt. Now we've taken it out. Now it needs to adapt again. So now we're working with the city of Fernandina and the University of North Florida to talk about a salt marsh restoration project in here. So one thing has led to another in order to make sure that when we do something like this, there's a backup plan to help nature get back to the way it needs to do before it does any more damage. And then what's the next thing we do? Let's look at 8th Street and Dave Street. Do their box culverts need to be bigger? because they're more usable, especially 8th Street. But do their box culverts need to be bigger? The other great thing about removing the street is that it improves the resilience of the city of Fernandina Beach. Because you're allowing the marsh to do what it needs to do, which is act like a sponge and soak up wave energy. And so it's gonna be able to improve its work for the city. So it's actually benefiting the city to do something like this. So that's the plan of how things, an excellent example of how it works when your waterway becomes listed as impaired. Now again, some of our waterways may not get a TMDL for, a decade or so, which is what we push for. TMDLs across the state for certain metals and nitrogen and phosphorus are already established in the state. They're just now doing fecal coliform TMDLs, and they're doing it in piecemeal. So the St. Johns River, they're piloting the TMDL for bacteria right now. Okay, St. Mary's River, we're at the bottom of the list. Okay, so they're prioritizing the bigger watersheds, the ones that have the most ag on them, right? Because of the bacteria contamination.
Is that?
Say it again?
Is they that?
Yes. All right, next slide. So now how do we all fit in? So water quality monitoring and our reporting program.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. The clicker. Strategic priorities. So we did strategic planning last year. It took us 6 months to do, and out came our top 3 priorities, which is community engagement, capacity building, and fund development. And all wrapped into that is strategic partnerships and a communications plan. So we're going to mostly focus in on community engagement. And so one of the questions we were asked by our strategic planner was, how do we keep the St. Mary's River connected and engaged with our communities to support the health, sustainability, and resilience of the St. Mary's River? And so we've improved our public health through our water testing program, emergency management and resilience planning, conservation advocacy, and recreational opportunities. So what's the fish? My life right now. Yes, you didn't know? Man, we have a whole sneak peek documentary about it. Yeah, that's a whole other presentation. That's exciting. Directly ties into our water testing program. So for community engagement, we want to improve public health. We want to improve the people's health that are swimming in the river, that are using the river, fishing, shrimping, swimming, kayaking, boating, anybody that comes into contact with the water. And so one of our most successful projects is our Horsepen Creek 319 grant. Both of these 319 grants are in the state of Georgia. Horsepen Creek's in Camden, City of Homeland's going on right now. We actually just came from a meeting in the City of Homeland in Charlton County. We talked about daylighting Escambia Slough, and then I mentioned the Marsh Grass Restoration Project, which is in process. Hang on one second, Allison. So the Clean 13 Award, this is an award through the Georgia Water Coalition to award 13 outstanding projects, people, elected leaders, citizen action groups that have done amazing work to protect the waterways in the state of Georgia. So the Horsepen Creek Water Improvement Team, we are a part of, we're a partner in, including Camden County, their Department of Health, EPD, which is their DEP version. My life is alphabet soup. But we were awarded one of the Clean 13 awards back in 2023 because of the Horsepen Creek project. It was a successful example of the clean water, utilizing the Clean Water Act, their 319 amendment, to improve the health of the community around Horsepen Creek. So just a little background, Horsepen Creek flows into the St. Mary's in a town called Browntown. And it's right outside of Kingsland. And the kids every summer, it's all impoverished, low income, not a lot of not a lot of high education area, and all septic. So kids would go swimming in the summer, because just saw the beautiful beaches, like that's where I would want to go. But the kids kept getting sick after swimming in the creek, and they'd come home and they'd be like, "Mom, I don't feel really good." You just got this summer ick. They were swimming in poop water. We were sampling, you all saw that 7,300 on Escambia Slough, those were the numbers we were always getting in Horseman Creek. Always. Summer, winter, always. Leaking septic tanks. We did eDNA testing. It was human. So a group of people banded together, Riverkeeper included, and formed the Horseman Creek Improvement Team and the 319 grant. And in 5 years, they replaced 50 failing septic tanks, nearly free of charge to the homeowners. Within the first few septic tanks being replaced, the results were going from that $7,000 number all the way down to like 400. And then it kept getting better and better and better. And so now kids are swimming in this creek, not getting sick, which is great, right? So that's how we were awarded that, and we're doing the same thing in the 319 grant because we're getting those 7,000, 2,000 numbers right now with these creeks that they're fishing in. All right, now you go. So citizen scientists, these are all the most of the sampling sites that we do or have sampled at some point. It's not all of our active ones. Y'all might recognize this handsome fella, Mark Tomes, right? So he's was one of our citizen scientists, unfortunately. He has left us, but he was doing some of our sampling along Florida 121, so all the way over in Callahan, Hilliard area, on the east side of the St. Mary's River. So he was sampling for us, so we engaged citizen scientists in order to do this work, because this is extensive, all those sites, all that travel, and then it takes hours to do, and to complete, and then you gotta go through some training, and then you gotta deal with me. Like, that's a full-time job right there. Just ask Allison and Rick, they know. So it's a big job, and so that's why we want our community engaged in this, because y'all live here, you want to protect it, we want you to protect it, and this is the way you can do it. Okay? Okay, Ross? I knew y'all would love all of my people. So, what are we sampling for? Bacterial contamination. In fresh water, it's E. coli. In brackish and salt water, it's enterococci. And dissolved oxygen. The reason why those are red is those are two big indicators of water quality health. Right? You have bacteria for human recreation, but DO because you want healthy aquatic habitat. Okay? We also test for temperature, pH, total dissolved solids, and either salinity or conductivity, depending if you're fresh or brackish water. And so Faith is sampling at Egan's Creek off of the bridge, Atlantic, is that it? Atlantic Avenue. Thank you. I couldn't remember if it was Boulevard or Avenue. And then we have our agar plate and then our water testing kit for chemicals right there. So those are the tools we currently have. And now we're going to map our septic tanks. So this is what Rick did for us. As a board member and as an ArcGIS pro. So he contacted the Department of Health of all 4 counties. Nassau and Baker share a Department of Health person. And so these are all the permitted septic tanks that we know of. In the 4 counties of the watershed. And they're color-coded by county. So green is Nassau. So you can see where the big counties, the big municipalities. Here's Callahan, right? Here's Hilliard. Here we're coming into Yulee, and there's Fernandina Beach and Amelia Island, right? Here's a major tributary right here. This is South Prong, St. Mary's, septic in Baker County. Here's the city of Homeland, where we're doing our 319 grant for the septic tank remediation. A little outdated, but here's Horsepen. So there's some old data in there, because most of those, they're permitted, so they're there. And then these are all the ones that we know of, and that are currently in the ground. These are all the ones that are 15 to 25 years old. Anybody know how long you should go until you replace the septic tank? How long? Huh?
5 years are full, I don't know about that.
To replace it, not to pump it, but to replace a septic tank. 20 to 30 years. You should be replacing your septic tank completely.
Tank or field, both?
Huh?
Tank or field, both?
Both.
You
want to get both checked.
You have to move it, or do you just have to replace it?
You just have to replace it. So, 15 to 25 plus year old septic tanks. How often should you pump your septic tanks?
3 years.
Every 3 to 5 years. And the more you, just like your car, the better better you maintain it, the longer your car is gonna go, right? Costs $250, $350 to pump out your septic tanks. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're having a hard time putting food on the table every day, that's a lot. A lot of money, right? You have to budget for it. Which is why we have this cyclical issue of septic tank failures in our impoverished areas, right? So that gives a visual of all of our septic tanks in our watershed. And we have found holes in the Department of Health's information. Whole neighborhoods don't have their septic tanks listed. The septic tank's in the middle of the road. New. Okay, that's a surprise. You shouldn't be running over those things. You shouldn't be parking on those things, right? So, we are, please no. But it just gives a visual of how much septic tank is in the watershed, right? And so now the question is like, well, let's just put them all in the sewer. We'll get to that. All right, so next slide. So how are we using this data? So we have superimposed our 2024 E. coli data onto the 15 to 25 plus year map. Okay? So the bigger the circle, the worse the results are. So the big orange ones, bad. Okay? Little green ones, okay, they're fine. Little yellow, well, maybe. We should keep an eye on it. But you can tell where some of our sampling is and where the septic tanks are. So there's Homeland. This is the new Deep Creek plantation over on the west side. Here's Escambia and Egan's. So that's all of our 2024 data. And so what this information is going to start telling us is, where do we need to go to sample? Right? If this is 2020, if this is 15 to 25 year data, we're going to want to target the waterways that are going through those neighborhoods because they're coming up on replacement time. And are they failing or are they not? So we want to start exploring and finding out where do we need to go. Otherwise, we're just flying blind. We're sampling blind for no reason. We do sample off of wastewater treatment facilities. We do sample off of both the plants downtown. So any big plant, the landfill in Charleston County we sample from. So a lot of the big industries we do sample, but we want to know where the septic's potential issue could be, because that's unseen. That's underground. We don't know. And I will say, I'll get to that in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself now. All right, so what can we do? Okay, what can you do as citizen action group to help improve our water quality around the island and around the St. Mary's River watershed? Don't over-fertilize your lawns. Right, we're coming into fertilizer season, we're coming into watering our yards a lot, we like to get a nice green, lush grass. Don't over-fertilize. If it doesn't get taken up and it's a heavy rain, it's going to wash right down the storm drain and out into our waterways. Okay, there's your nutrient problem. Right plant, right place. So UF-IFAS, so trying to plant native, Florida friendly. So trying not just planting whatever looks pretty, but actually thinking about what plant is adapted to live here with little water during the summertime and not as much fertilizer that can live in the sediment that we have here. Okay? And there's a lot of plant places around town that have native options, but I like to say, or IFAS likes to say right plant, right place. Scoop the poop. Bacterial contamination, it doesn't just ruin shoes, but if it rains, it's going to wash down the storm drain and there's bacterial contamination, okay? These are the small things that can make a big impact. Maintain your septic tank, pump out every 3 to 5 years. Know where your septic tank is. That's a shocker, right? You think? Replace every 20 to 30 years, okay? I really like that graphic also. Yes. All right, so community action. So that was what you can do personally, but what can you do as a community? So because of Forest Pin Creek and the Homeland 319 grant, Camden and Charlton County now require a septic tank pump out every time the electrical bill changes hands. And they track it. The state of Georgia and the state of Florida do not require you track your septic tank pump outs. So you could have put in your septic 30 years ago, and our data is going to be in, your dot's going to be in that 25 plus. But we're never going to know when you pumped it out last. So we can't go in and be like, hey, we'd like to help you pay to get your tank pumped. But the county has passed ordinances that anytime the electrical bill changes hands, you gotta pump it out, you gotta report it, which is great. Update critical infrastructure and promote septic to sewer. You can't just plug everybody into sewer. Because sewer systems, sewer treatment facilities, they have capacity. The downtown city, the Fernandina one, has a capacity of 3.5 million gallons. Right now, they're only using 2.5 million gallons. What happened last year in August? You guys remember Debbie? Do you remember the 3 weeks of rain leading up to Debbie? Okay, so we had 3 weeks of rain, culminated in Debbie. I get a call from a city commissioner saying, please give us grace. I'm like, what happened? Like, we had to discharge 6 million gallons into the Amelia River because we were over capacity. Partially treated. The streets were flooded, right? They were telling you not to flush your toilets, right? The city of St. Mary's, they had to discharge 20,000 gallons because there was too much water from the sky. Yes?
That led to the question I was thinking about through the whole thing. When I lived in the Tampa area, we had a torrential rain, and in St. Pete, something happened, and raw sewage was going into the Gulf.
Yeah.
And last night, I saw on the news in Philadelphia, when the culvert had gotten beyond the capacity of the water treatment system, so they dumped raw sewage.
Yeah.
That may happen here, do you think, or maybe one of these paper plants has that kind of, because they have a water treatment system on both those paper bills?
So they are required to have a capacity that's more than what they are permitted for, to allow for precipitation. I'm going to use the sewage treatment facility, right? They have 1 million gallons of capacity spared, right? But when you have that much water coming at once, there's nothing you can do about it. It's coming. And it's coming from the ground too.
And that's what I figured percolates up.
Yes.
I put a map up there of the city, you can see how it's all cut up. And I put the dot where Ryan is, and I left West Rock off. And if you draw a circle, you can see you've got marshes and everything. But what had happened up there in Jessup a couple years ago, where they had a toxic discharge?
That is Altamaha Riverkeeper's watershed, so I am not familiar with Jessup. Yeah, okay. I'm not, yeah, that's a different jurisdiction than me. Yeah, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I was curious because I was reading this article and it said, yeah, there was a discharge into the river. I talked to the St. John's manager down here in the basin, and a guy said he drove up there, he looked at it, they had it under control, and they think what we just discussed happened where they had a huge storm, overflow of the culvert, and they put toxic into the river. That's the fear I think we have here.
So a lot of people, when they're like, just put it on sewer, I'm like, right, so what are you gonna do about the critical infrastructure? And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, you gotta update the critical infrastructure as you add more people in. And with climate change and sea level rise and more rain coming, you gotta take it up a notch together, right? Because there's more rain coming. Okay, so you can't just plug in and go, you gotta update as you go, okay? Community education on the importance of pumping out septic tanks, reducing nutrient pollution, regulating big farm fertilizer, and application of biosolids. So biosolids has come into Nassau County, it's on the west side. So it is sewage sludge. So it's treated, but it's nutrient-filled sludge from a sewage treatment facility that they put on the land to do fertilizer. But it washes off into the river and it can cause nutrient contamination. And so right now it's unregulated by the state. If you're using gray water, which is the potable water, or not potable, but it's unpotable water that you can use on your sprinkler systems, don't fill with fertilizer too, don't fertilize. Like, it's already got enough nutrients in it, you shouldn't have to fertilize as well. And then encourage bigger buffers along waterways. And then get engaged. So y'all are here, so y'all are engaged, so that's great. You can do more, like this, ways to engage, okay? So become a member. We are a membership-based organization. Really what we are trying to do is take our water quality testing program to the next level. You've seen the ArcGIS map. That's happened in the last 6 months thanks to Rick. In the last month and a half, we've brought on the water quality coordinator to help corral and engage and encourage and empower our volunteers to do the work that you've been seeing, going out and sampling, donating their time. So making a donation. So right now, the state of Florida does not take our data because we are not using the standard operating procedure that they approve. We are using stuff that Georgia approves because they developed the standard operating procedure, but they don't approve, Florida does not approve ours. So we're little like red flag waivers. And it's impactful, right? We got a Scambia slough, the street removed, right? So it's impactful. But what happens when the wastewater treatment facility overflows again? We're here, we're on the ground, we're in the community. DEP has other priorities probably around the state. They're underfunded, they're understaffed, just like the rest of us, right? They're not gonna come, drop everything and come here, but we are here. So we need the tools that the state uses in order to report directly into their state database. And so when we are seeing issues, we're reporting it in so they can see that we're doing it and they know where the issues are. Or they can see that Escambia Slough water quality is improving because of the restoration activity. So they can see it both ways. But we don't have the tools to do it, and we need the people power in order to make it happen. So a donation to our water quality program can really, really make an impact on our community's water quality and our community's health. Staying connected, we have newsletters, social media, and events, sponsor a program or event, become a river ambassador. So we have a couple of events coming up that you can engage in. We have a cleanup this Saturday. Allison already hit the ground running. We have 2 water quality trains already scheduled. We're gonna have one in each county. So the May 31st one is in the city of St. Mary's. And then we have one in Fernandina Beach on August 16th. And so if you sign up for our newsletters, you'll get that information. You can use this training as just educational. Like, what are we doing? How do you test? Why do you test this way? Where are the problem areas? You can just build awareness of just understanding what's going on. Or if you want to become a citizen scientist, you'll now be trained to be able to go out and do this stuff. Okay? And then be a river ambassador, make your voice heard. Y'all have very strong voices. I already know that. So please support your St. Mary's Riverkeeper today. And with that, I think that was the last one. Go ahead. One more. Thank you for having us today. This is Allison's information and my information. And if anybody has, I don't know how much time we have left. So I'm going to look to the leaders to make sure we have time for questions.
We do.
Okay, good.
So, back to the horse pen.
Yeah.
Is there some visible evidence of a compromised septic system that's, you know, going out into a creek? I mean, what is the compromise?
What do you mean compromise?
Well, the septic systems are impacting the creek.
Right.
So what's going wrong with the septic system?
They're overflowing, they're cracked, the drain field isn't working as well as it should. In a septic tank system, you should be pouring bleach down your sinks or your toilets.
So this is becoming surface runoff?
You'll see, maybe not in our waterways, but a lot of times you'll see algae bloom because there's a lot of nutrient pollution. The kids are getting sick. It's very subtle. Some of the times if your drain field is failing, you'll notice that you're working really hard to mow the grass over your drain field more than the rest of your yard. Or you'll notice like there's a pathway to the creek that's growing better than the rest of your yard is. And that's a surface thing, but it's subtle. Like that's like the discharge pipes, we know where those are. Septic tanks are the silent killers because you don't know about it until it's your kids coming home sick all the time from swimming in the waters. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
Yes.
I have a septic tank and I use Ridex regularly.
Okay.
Had my septic tank emptied and the guy said it looks like new. It's old, but it's old. What is your opinion on using those bacterial additions to a septic tank to help with this issue?
I do not know. I'm not an expert on that, so I'm gonna lean on somebody, whoever was doing that, as the expert on that issue.
Okay, and the other question
Yes.
is you were focusing on bacterial pollutants rather than any other pollutants? Which are those other pollutants and where do they come from that we should be on the lookout for?
So for the septic tank in particular?
No.
Just in general?
In general, in the river, it seems like, you know, we came here and there's a lot about septic and E. coli and, all of that, and we understand that. What about the other pollutants?
Yeah.
What are included in those and where do they come from?
So, they can come from different places, so we don't test, I described what we do test for, because that's the easy one. Once you start getting into like the metals, then you have to send it off to a lab, which costs money, which testing for enterococci also costs money, for that. So the metals like, aluminum, iron, mercury, those are also some of the impairments that can happen in the waterway. And so one success story we have is, and I want to point this out, West Rock's permit is up for renewal this December, just so y'all know, for public comment period purposes. Their renewals are required every 5 years. And so RYAM's discharge permit, and the reason why I'm saying this is because we were successful in it. Their discharge permit was up in 2022, right? Is that right? 2022? We successfully got iron and aluminum removed from their discharge because Amelia River was impaired for iron and aluminum. So we pointed that out. Now that the Amelia River is impaired for dissolved oxygen, that's a really strong case for those site-specific water quality criteria that are set for those effluent discharge areas because they have their mixing zones, which don't have to meet state standards. They do outside of it. But now the whole Amelia River is impaired for dissolved oxygen.
Do we know where those areas are?
The site-specific criteria where their discharges are, the RYAM was in their permit.
No, I mean the dissolved oxygen dead areas, dead zones of the river. Do we know where they are?
They're in their mixing zones, which are in their permits. So RYAM's is in their permits, and I was not with St. Mary's Riverkeeper when West Rock had theirs last time, but when it comes up in December, we'll have the Latin longs for those.
So you mentioned, that your data wasn't acceptable by the state because you weren't using your standard operating procedures. So what can you do to get those, up to the level?
So we just need to buy, and Rick, jump in, we need the specific meters that they are using. All the industries use the same meters because they have to report to the state as well. And so we just need to use the same meters that the state is using, so they'll accept our information, and that way we can input our data into their WIN program. And Rick, can you talk?
Well, just that they're not cheap.
They're not cheap.
And that's where a fundraising campaign really is going to be necessary if we're going to get the attention that the area deserves and needs. And I think we're compiling a list thanks to the Water Alliance, which again, they got started. You said it's an international organization and all, but it started in the Hudson River in New York in the 1960s. And that's where the voices got loud, and that's where that work was gone.
And it was Oystermen that started it.
And because
money we're talking about, how much money we're talking about?
Yeah, what's expensive?
$3,500 maybe
Per meter.
per meter.
And how many meters? Oh, so it sets out in the river, right?
No.
We would go out and we would dip the meter in the water, and we would get the recordings, report it, and then send it off to the state.
How many meters do you cover?
What would, maybe 5?
Yeah, if we had, then we could really be expanding
Yeah.
those sites. And
So
again,
then we can do a lot of these exploratory stuff, and it's really quick. Right now, and Allison may be able to speak to this because she's been learning on the fly on this. When Mark was doing his samples, he was doing 5 sites, and it took him 3 hours. 4 sites?
So 4 sites and, total time 6 to 8.
6 to 8 hours.
And also the responsibility.
And so giving him a meter instead of like doing the DO droplets takes about 15 minutes each, and you gotta do it twice. And then you're out in the field in the bugs.
Would you do that
In
once
the
a
heat.
month?
Once a month.
And you had Ray Ross, she was the only one.
Doing those sites in Fernandina, downtown Fernandina.
Just really one person maybe had the meters.
No. We We would want to put the meters in strategic places of issues, and we would want to have them in case an emergency was happening. But we would put them with specific people, specific groups based on where they're sampling, whereas other people just do bacteria, whereas some do both chemical and bacteria
So
sampling.
those specialized meters will check the other, metals and things with the.
You need to come with a train.
No, no, they don't do the metals, they just do the ones that we do. So again, metal testing, you have to send that off to a lab, a special lab to be able to get that information.
But you can pick it up at the same time, and you get a sample, and then you put it in your process. to send
Yes,
out to the
and then we would send it. So for example, an enterococci sample, they give us, the lab in Jacksonville gives us a little jar with some powder in it. We go and sample and we deliver it back to Jacksonville. It costs us $50 a sample. So just to give you an idea of just enterococci. E. coli, we do it in a little egg incubator. And it costs us $5 a plate.
So this is a comment about how you can get the money.
Okay.
All right. That is very small amount of money to raise in a community like this. But nobody knows this stuff except the people in this room.
And everybody on Facebook now.
So, is this presentation available to us?
If I'm invited to come and talk, yes.
Well, but nobody can see it unless you deliver it.
Correct.
So that's gonna make you a very important person in terms of fundraising.
Thank you.
I was the chairman of the development committee for Barnabas, and we raised several $1 million last year.
Great. Do you want a job?
No, but I'd like you to listen. I mean, I think that that's a very easy goal in this community.
Great.
But you're gonna be very busy if you're the only person who can give this talk.
That is why Allison and Rick is here as well. Yep, so it's a training opportunity.
So what we have to do is find places where you can give this talk to larger groups of people.
I love it. I'm all ears.
How about the city's question?
I would love to be invited.
And,
Maybe as a workshop, right? Because it's kind of like, yeah,
not everybody.
yeah, yeah.
We would also want the metals as well as the bacteria, it's very important. We want the whole thing. We're tired of guessing.
Yep, we all are. I get it. You had someone in the, yes, Rick, I know I'm.
Can you explain to me, you mentioned that in Georgia they have standard operating procedures that are accepted. Why does Florida not have that? And what do they need to do to get that?
Because Georgia's Department of Natural Resources developed a program called Georgia Adopt a Stream. And it's a citizen science monitoring program. And so they developed the protocols that we are following in order to do this water sampling. Florida doesn't have an Adopt a Stream program.
So what needs to be done to do that? To get,
Legislation.
It would have to be led by
Well,
the
that's what I'm
Florida
wondering.
DEP. And they would have to create,
I wonder
So-
if it'll be-
yeah, so that's why we're saying is like, in order for them to take our data, which they want our data, we need to fit into their requirements.
okay, well, that's my simple question is,
That's a great question to ask, why not? That's all.
you need legislation that says this is what we need.
Lori, yes.
Back to the wastewater treatment plant for the city of Fernandina, you said it has a 3.5 million gallon capacity, and right now we're at 2.5 million gallons. Does that 3.5 million gallon capacity give leeway for big rain events?
Yes.
And so are we at that? I mean, how much I guess I'm asking, if the 2.5 million we're using, that million that's left over, is that for rain events, or do we have 1 million gallons left that we can tie into?
That is what they are permitted for.
And how
Now,
old is the
what that's
treatment
broken
plant?
up into, I don't know.
How old is the treatment plant?
Anybody know?
Good question.
Any ideas? I don't. What is it? Mid-70s is
Mid-70s is
what this gentleman
what I'm
said.
understanding as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check in you on that.
I would
one.
fact check that, but yes.
Can you speak a little bit about what you know of brine and its effluent in their wastewater into the river?
So they have to have their permit for it, and they have to fit within the state standards and the Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act was not set up to be like no discharge ever, right? It's supposed to keep getting better and better and better, so eventually we don't have to. But it sets standards for effluent discharge of what can be released into it. So they are within their permitted requirements, and we're sampling off of Bryant's discharge. We also do the same thing with West Rocks. We do it with all of the industry and the wastewater treatment facilities.
Where do we find that information?
On our website. So everything that they are discharging, they have to report in on, they have to constantly, report on and sample, and then it gets sent out to the state.
And do they have a daily discharge, is it constant, or is it, do they do it at certain times?
I don't know.
They
Is
do
it
it at high tide.
high tide, so then it flushes out? That makes a lot of sense.
And I would think the concentration thing.
Yeah.
I heard that the
I think it's
problem-
before, there's different points along the pipe that they have to sample for what gets discharged.
I heard that one of the meetings where we had the debate amongst the candidates for the beach, they mentioned that the ditches here are not adequate, so a lot of the downtown water goes to, instead of going out to the ocean, a lot of downtown rain goes through the septic system. And then it's tied into the sewer system, not really tied into drainage.
Right.
And that's one of the problems here is that, you know, a lot of these ditches right here go nowhere, they just go down in the ground.
Yeah.
So they can't handle the ditches is a
Right.
problem.
Yeah, and then it rains and then the groundwater rises. Yeah. Do you have a question?
I just want, one of the reasons that Escambia was like all the stars were aligned for water quality, but also for stormwater and flooding. Escambia flooded 8th Street. So it kind of, the message is that, if things work right, people will respond,
Right.
governments respond.
Right.
You mentioned something about Dade Street, I didn't know if that was next on the list or what.
Well, no, it's now that Escambia Street has been removed, now so the way the watershed works is you have two waterways coming in, it's coming under 8th Street, it's coming down Dade Street to feed the slough right there. And so now it's like, okay, now that this has been removed, is this gonna fix the problem? Or is it now like, we need to make a bigger culvert on 8th Street and a bigger culvert on Dade Street to allow more water to flood and recede better versus it bottlenecking?
Because they've got some sort of survey out there, or some sort of map right now about a loop connecting Dade Street with Center Street. And it's got water lots, listed on it, I'm not sure.
Water what?
It's called water lots on the map. I'll show it to you.
Yeah, please, share. Paul?
Hey, just real quick, if I can do like an awareness piece,
Yes.
also on what the committee does, if you don't mind.
Oh, the river management
Yeah,
committee?
because what I found out is 2 weeks ago, I went to the city commission meeting, and I found out that they did not know about the St. Mary's Riverkeeper Management Committee. And for everybody in this room,
Oh, the St. Mary's River Management Committee, not the
Management,
Riverkeeper.
yep, not the Riverkeeper, I always throw that in there.
Yeah.
But they don't, what Fernandina didn't know was that there was Nassau representatives that are there. And what a lot of folks don't know is that that committee also kind of is an advisory committee. But really where I wanted to go to end was really with Emily, because I've been here for a little time now, and I have never seen more advocacy for the river than I have since you've been in there.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Do you have any information, or do you maintain or monitor the Floridan aquifer that the two mills pull all of their fresh water from?
We do not, we don't have the means to do that. We can access the reports that are submitted by the two mills, but we don't have the capabilities of being able to do that.
What about the discharge of that used water at a different temperature? Do you consider that pollution by thermal pollution?
Yeah, thermal pollution is, but that should be in their mixing zone. It shouldn't be outside of that. They only have a special permit that's site-specific criteria for their mixing zone, and once it gets outside of that boundaries, it should match the water quality of the rest of the waterway. Should.
So it's probably self-reporting?
Yeah, they sell them.
So I have a question about the mixing zone. How big of an area is that? And do we know if as the radius goes out, that the dissolved oxygen doesn't also expand out? But I don't know how big a mixing zone is.
Yeah, it's long and it's short. I can't give you exact, it was 2 years ago that I wrote that. But I can send you our public comment if that is helpful. Because we tried to get the dissolved oxygen removed from we tried to get the mixing zone removed because of the dissolved oxygen issue. Because it was tentatively impaired for dissolved, the Amelia River was tentatively impaired for dissolved oxygen at the time. But because it wasn't approved by EPA, the state couldn't do anything about it. So, but it's long because there's different parts of their pipes that things are released at, so it's not all at once. But it's long and it's narrow, and we sampled just outside of it on the downstream side of it, so when they're releasing at high tide, you know, we're there, maybe not on that exact time. That's actually really good information because we sample on the outgoing tide. So, but I can send you that information. Yeah. High outgoing tide is what we do. Yes, Rick?
I wanted to comment just on the importance of that monitoring and the instrumentation. The Amelia Island Sailing Club volunteers, and we sample 10 locations, so we monitor 10 locations. And we have 6 people in the club that are certified to be samplers. If we don't have the instrumentation, and we don't at this point, we have to go out there and to take these samples, and then we have to do the titrations, and that's an overnight process for us to do while we're doing the bacterial sampling. Talking about mixing zones, that's an area we sample. But if we had the instrumentation, we'd get an immediate read on dissolved oxygen instead of having to go back and set up a chemistry lab and titrate that. If we had those instruments, then we could be out there on events or multiple samples, not just the 10 sites that we're doing, but maybe 5 sites above and below a mixing zone and in it, so that we could really see what's going on in real time and get that reading and then follow it and use that to try to identify where are we losing this dissolved oxygen.
Which also frees up time to be able to do any additional sampling, like if
Where do we buy these machines?
Online, not Amazon though. We tried that failed.
What are those called?
There are special scientific equipment websites that we would need to go. They're called YSIs. Y'all heard of those?
So any of us could go out and buy one?
Well, yeah.
Yes, but in order to report to the state, you have to get your sampling protocols approved by them.
Right, so the samples are good, but we could use a better machine for $3,000 to $4,000.
But you have to get certified.
So-
The thing
We
about
got it.
the roadblock is the time and the energy, that's all.
Just our donation.
So we sampled 5 locations yesterday, and we'll have the results tomorrow.
Yeah, titration takes a while.
Yeah, and the bacteria, 'cause that has to incubate
That
for
culture needs
24
to
hours.
grow.
So great question, so now that I'm gonna repeat it. So the question was, how do we make a donation? How do you make a donation specifically to water quality? So most of our donations, we try to make it as non-transactional as possible. So you fund us and you trust that we will use the money as is appropriate for protecting the St. Mary's River. If you want it specifically for water testing program, equipment, sampling, helping us support with staff capacity, then you can go on our website and you can donate just to water quality sampling. There's a button. So you can just go for that. Yes, Julie.
So I have a hypothetical. So FDEP put out a public comment because they're gonna be dredging a new part of the river. They're gonna be dredging from the northwestern corner by Fort Clinch down to the marina. So they put out a comment, and they wanted people to comment.
Okay. This is hypothetical, right?
I tried, the comment period ended April 6th. I tried to put it on Facebook. I put it in the Sierra Club newsletter. They probably didn't get more than 2 comments. That would surprise me if they did. But what I wanted to comment, or what I did worth of dioxin and arsenic and I don't even know what.
Yeah.
So this program that they are instigating, they have changed it now to where it doesn't have to abide by right whale season, they can do it any time of the year. And that they're taking it offshore, and they have a 500-acre area where they're gonna dump it. And what I'm worried about is, like, I think I read through that, and to me, it looked like the data they were using was from 1999 and 2003, like it didn't look updated. So I just wonder, what can we do? I mean, first of all, we never hear about these things.
Yeah.
Second of all, everybody's lazy and they don't want to take the time to write an email. And I don't know if you guys knew about it, I don't know if you put any input, but this is now going to be a program that they will continually, not continually dredge, they're going to dredge every 4 to 5 years for 10 years. And now we're stuck with it. It's going to change the water column. It's going to take 3 months to do. So they'll close down the river for 3 months. It's gonna change the water column because they're stirring everything up. They say that the fish will leave. They say there's no manatees that'll be affected, though I don't believe that. They say that the right whales won't be affected, but they're taking huge dredges, possibly during right whale season, right, and dumping in that 500-acre area. I mean, all these things just seem like huge nightmares.
Yeah, so I did not hear about that. So another thing for community action, or even just for you to do, we're a small staff, and up until about 3 months ago, it was just me and my board. So anytime something comes across your desk, please send it my way, because it's a small watershed, but it's a big footprint to have to monitor 2 states and 4 counties that are vastly different. So anytime something comes across your desk and you're like, hey, we need more comments, you know, if we engage in it, we'll send it out to our stakeholders, we'll put it on our social media, we'll share it. You know, it's a community effort, right? We gotta tell each other about it. You know, when the mining issue was going on in Charlton County, we reached out to our Amelia Island friends and conservation friends out here and said, help us, because this is gonna impact your river, and we need all the voices that we can get. So we're in it together, and we gotta watch each other's backs and engage each other. So no, I did not see that, even though I get the Army Corps' emails, I get DEP's emails, but I think one day I got 10 from Army Corps, or was that EPA? I got like 25 in a day.
Do they ever take soil samples or silt samples before they stir up everything?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that they were using old data.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's something that I'm sure you put in your comment, or should be in someone's comment, that you should be doing core sampling.
So I actually missed the deadline because I was busy doing so many other things, but I called the woman and she said she would accept my comment several days late. Now, I don't know what would happen if we sent comments since it closed April 6th, but.
Yes, Lori.
You mentioned that it was $50 for the health department to do the sampling.
For us to do it from a certified lab in Jacksonville, not
Right.
DOH.
So how much, and that was for E. coli, for bacterial?
For bacteria.
How much do they charge for metal?
I do not know, because we've never done it before.
I can check today. Depending on how much, how broad the spectrum is, it's like a couple hundred to 2,000 for like if they want to test everything.
It's like 27 analytes, right? They test for like 27 things at once.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
You
You don't just do mercury, you have to do the whole
It's
thing.
like a TBC, total blood count.
Yeah,
Total
you
liver
just
count.
test for everything, yeah.
Yeah, so like 1,500, 2,000.
Thank you for looking at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think it was 2 years ago, though I might have the time span incorrect, that they found the, what is it,
Enterococci.
Enterococci at Jasmine Beach.
Yes.
Simmons Road.
Okay.
And then they quit testing anymore because people got upset about it. So I wonder if there's a way, because I don't think it's right for people to take their families to Jasmine and be swimming in water, and if you get a cut, you're gonna get an infection. So what can we do about that?
So we have done a couple of samples at Jasmine when that happened. It is hard to do water sampling in the ocean. It's hard to stand in the ocean. So that takes us, we have asked DEP if we can do that. There's a legislation, it's called bathing, safe to bathe legislation. I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on that one. But the whole idea was to encourage additional sampling along the beaches from local groups like Riverkeepers to be able to do that. But that's a special, like we would need to bring DEP out to show us how they sample because we just, when do you sample? Do you sample on the wave? Do you sample as it's going out? Like, when do you do it? So that would take a special, but we have tried it. I fell over a few times.
What did you find?
It was 0. And so when I looked it up today, they did delist it, Jasmine Street. So when you look on the map that I shared with y'all with gray areas.
But I'm not sure they delisted it because of.
No, they said that they stopped sampling it because they didn't get anything within 21 days. So that's what it says on the website.
Can I get clarification? Is there a pipe going from Reindeer, Ryan, all the way up to Jasmine on the ocean? Is that like a?
It's not an active pipe. I know that there was one there, but I think that was in the 80s. I'm looking around for some help. 60s. So it's not being used anymore.
How do we know?
It used to go through the greenway because it's not there anymore.
It's not there anymore, right?
Well, there's parts of it.
There's parts of it, but it's not.
Here in Maryland Avenue?
Runs right out
Jasmine. Jasmine,
Right
yes,
through
right
there.
down Jasmine Street.
That's by Jasmine.
Yeah, it's by Jasmine Street.
It went right down, basically down Jasmine. Parts of it are still in the creek.
Yeah.
Going out there, but it's been
But
abandoned
no,
for
they're
years.
not using that.
How is it abandoned?
We just don't use it. We don't know.
But that one was pre-Clean Water Act, it sounds like. So
Pipeline Surf Shop is, Pipeline Surf Shop is named that because of the pipeline.
Interesting. I like learning that.
So on the comparison map, it was very dark and the north half of Amelia Island, but the
If we were
south
to
half
write,
of Amelia
and for a lecture, it'd be nice if we knew what the back door was.
It didn't show anything.
That's the reason, it's called worst plan.
We're concerned about the oyster beds that are on the west side of Amelia Island, down in that cove that is, Amelia City area, Buccaneer Trail area. Yes, there are oyster beds there, and right now, and there's a stream that actually is the watershed of the Phillips Manor Road area that comes and drains into there. There's a developer who is working on building houses, three-story houses along there, across that stream, and it flows right out into the oyster beds. And so those of us in that area are very concerned about that. But I see your map doesn't show, maybe it's because it's not been tested, but I would love to one day be able to harvest those oysters. And I don't really want any more septic tanks put out on a stream that dumps right out into the oysters.
Yeah, so this isn't my map, just to clarify. This is the state of Florida's map. So sometimes this is the part of where local groups, the importance of having local groups doing the sampling is because the state may come once or twice a year. And they may not come during certain times where there could be a bacteria contamination, or maybe it's the winter time where they're not growing as quickly. So for example, one place that we have identified, St. Mary's Riverkeeper has identified as a potential issue area is Jackson Creek. So there's a whole bunch of septic in that community upstream of Jackson Creek. We asked DEP if they've ever sampled it, they're like, we do every once in a while, but we've never had anything. So the fact that, and then I was like, well, we're getting high numbers, and this was the summertime 2 summers ago, and I was like, we're getting high numbers, and they're like, oh, send us the data, and that's when we were like, oh, we won't take our data. So that's when we were trying to get the meters going, because then they could start taking our data. But we put Jackson Creek on their radar, because they're the state, there's like 10 people for the whole state to do water
It's
testing.
right south of the Ryan.
South, yeah, sorry, I have to orient myself so much.
So how many samples would that
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?